Welcome to the Oracle Scroll. My name is Kevin Walder and I am your host, and I invite you to join my guests and myself as we discuss all things metaphysical. Welcome to episode 4 of the Oracle Scroll. Today we're going to look at the High Priestess, card number 2 in the deck, and one of the major players in the major arcana. Then we'll take a very personal look at forgiveness and what it means to us today, and how we can participate. And then we'll answer a question from Claire, who has sent in a question for the readers to address. So join us now for episode 4. To begin, we'll talk about the High Priestess. And as I said, she is card number 2 in the deck, the Magician being number 1. The High Priestess is a key member of the major arcana family and often points to the real issue at hand whenever we're asking a question. This card is very symbolic. It is symbolic of feminine spirituality and passing along the teachings from one generation to the next. This card is the feminine balance to the Magician and indicates that sometimes quiet determination may be more effective than aggressive action. The High Priestess may be suggesting that intuition needs to play a bigger role in our everyday lives. Just as the Empress is the great nurturer of the deck, so the High Priestess symbolizes spiritual connection and the ability to plug in to the universal energy around us, while openly acknowledging our own inner divinity and power. The High Priestess represents the personification of connectedness in our spiritual world and encourages us to maintain the health of our relationship with the divine. The artwork for this card, especially in the Robin Wood deck, shows the priestess holding a book in one hand and a crystal ball in the other, indicating the need to blend knowledge and intuition in our daily lives. The scene is one of controlled power and connection to the divine. Keep in mind that this card carries a great deal of power, and far from being a passive energy, the High Priestess meets her challenges head-on with courage and conviction. This card says that you are capable of accomplishing anything you set out to do with the knowledge you already possess. We often waste so much of our precious energy looking for external direction and validation that we fail to recognize that our most important source of personal power resides within us. And the High Priestess is here to remind us of that fact. With her powerful intuition and personal connection to universal power, she is a shining example for everyone who seeks a deeper spiritual connection. Following her example enables us to open the doors to greater understanding and sharpened intuition. She also serves as a comforting presence when challenges arise, causing us to question our own abilities. By observing the path of the High Priestess, we are able to adjust our focus from the challenge to the infinite possibilities before us. She reminds us that, as hard as it may be to accept, all our answers are already inside us, and that fear of claiming our own strength is the single obstacle which prevents our progress. When I see the High Priestess appear in a reading, it says to me that the querent is getting in touch with her or his inner guidance in a new way. This card tells me that it is time to start listening to our inner voice for answers. The High Priestess is equally powerful in a reading for a male or a female. We all possess the capability to express the energy of the High Priestess in our lives. This card is all about staying in contact with our inner divinity and understanding the spiritual power we each possess. So, the three questions that the High Priestess puts forth: how do you express your inner divine in your daily life? How has the energy of the High Priestess influenced your life in the past? And last but certainly not least, do you regularly communicate with your inner divine? Now, the preceding was lifted directly from my book, Tarot for Lunch, Lessons from the Cards, available on Amazon. But I took it a bit further, and I prepared an interview with the High Priestess. This is kind of a little hobby of mine, to give these cards some personality and flesh them out a little bit, give them some, so we feel like they're friends. We feel like we know them. We feel like we can consult with them and confide in them. So the story goes that last time we got together in episode 3, we met the magician. And he had just made headlines after being vindicated in a court of law. And we had a conversation with him after that hearing. Today, we've learned that the High Priestess is in town for a local ritual function, and we're lucky enough to get invited to visit her after her event had concluded. So the interviewer steps forth and says, "Thank you for making space in your schedule for this impromptu visit. We do appreciate it." The High Priestess responds, "Well, time is limited, so if we could keep this moving, I'd appreciate that." So then the interviewer returns with, "Let's begin with the recent legal complaints lodged against your counterpart, the magician." Oh, the High Priestess, rolling her eyes, said, "Well, what a lot of silliness that was. The complaints were shown to be completely without foundation, and I certainly won't attempt to speak for the magician, but I would have handled the entire affair quite differently from the beginning. Sometimes he can be his own worst enemy." And the interviewer said, "Well, boy, can you elaborate on how your approach would have differed from his?" And the High Priestess says, "Well, though we are similar in focus, we employ radically different means to achieve our goals. The magician is assertive, aggressive, forward in his approach, which in turn causes some to be intimidated by his directness. I find I get far better results from a more reserved approach. Have you ever watched sumo wrestlers? A great deal of the skill involved is in using the weight and force of your opponent to advance your own position. Why can't that same strategy be used spiritually?" The interviewer says, "So are you saying then that your magic is passive?" And the High Priestess says, "Well, the short answer to that is yes, but as with most everything in this life, it's much more complicated than that. First of all, do not ever confuse passive with weak or even lacking commitment. Sometimes remaining passive in a combat situation requires a tremendous amount of strength and commitment. Basically, it is all about knowing when to stop pushing and let the momentum of the situation direct itself." And the interviewer steps forward again and says, "So you find a softer approach works better for you?" And the High Priestess responds, "That is not what I said at all. I just told you not to equate passive with weak, and that goes for soft as well. Just because I don't go after every situation with a sledgehammer does not mean I'm being soft. If you want soft, there are other members of the major arcana family for you to become attached to, but you won't find that here." The interviewer says, "Well, now I'm a little confused. Could you clarify that a bit more?" The High Priestess said, "My job is to teach and create pathways for learning specific lessons in magic and spirituality, and I will be the best teacher you will ever meet. but I will not tolerate a student who will not carry his or her own load. I am a teacher. I am not your mother. Likewise, I will not interfere in the natural progression of a spiritual event, just because a student becomes frightened of the speed or content. If you want the best spiritual teacher, that's me, and I can help you. But if you're looking for a warm and nurturing presence, well, you're going to have to come back later and maybe talk to the Empress. And the interviewer is a little exasperated by this time. He says, well, are there other ways that your style varies from the magician? And the high priestess says, well, he loves to brag about his ability to walk between the worlds and work comfortably in every aspect of existence as if he's the only one with this talent. Well, I can do that same work without ever leaving my altar. I have my scrying tools, and I'm an accomplished astral traveler. So I think my way is a much more efficient use of time and energy. And the interviewer says, well, tell us a little about your ritual style. And the high priestess says, well, in rituals, such as the one I performed earlier today, I invoke the goddess and become her voice in my community. The goddess speaks with three voices through me. Sometimes she is the maiden, young, carefree, full of energy. Other times she is the mother, strong and able, but taking full responsibility for her family. And thirdly, she can speak as the wise grandmother or crone, the keeper of the ancient wisdom and stories that are handed down from mother to daughter, the medicine woman of the family. I am quite comfortable with each of those aspects of the goddess. So the interviewer says, well, can we talk about your tools? And the high priestess says, well, my tools are varied depending on the artist's sense of my work, but I'm most often depicted with a scroll or a book of shadows and a crystal ball or scrying bowl. Since my work requires a high level of sensitivity and intuition, these are some of my favorite tools. I'm also frequently depicted holding a pomegranate, which is a symbol of fertility and menstruation. And the interviewer says, well, what else is common to your office of high priestess? And the high priestess says, well, my planetary attribution is the moon, so it also figures prominently in depictions of me, and I am often seen wearing the three phases of the moon as part of my jewelry. My elemental attribution is water, and I am, of course, feminine energy. And the interviewer says, well, are there other attributions peculiar to your office? And the high priestess says, well, I'm associated with the Hebrew letter Gimel, which literally means camel, speaks of my ability to carry spiritual weight, and I am connected to the rune U-R, which speaks of the strength of the bison and the refreshing rain. The owl figures prominently as a familiar, as it represents spirit communication and omens. There are times that I am depicted with a cat as a familiar as well. So then one of the favorite questions of this interviewer apparently is, do you ever feel misunderstood? And the high priestess says, well, of course I do, as do we all at times. Most of the time, the confusion about what constitutes passivity and weakness, as we discussed a little earlier. I like to think of myself as a cascading waterfall. I might be redirected at times by circumstance, but I will not and cannot be stopped. There is a tremendous power within this vessel. The interviewer returns with, what is it you most want people to know about your work? And the high priestess says, well, it's simple, really. Quit making it so hard on yourselves. Quit making my work so mysterious and unattainable. I'm here to help you go inside and discover the world within, which will guide us all to be our best. My work is all about getting into that quiet space in our minds where all the wisdom and answers of this existence and thousands of previous ones await our discovery. We all seem to think that we can find wisdom by attending a retreat or buying a book. Not that these don't serve a function, but until we are willing to do the work of getting into that quiet space, you may call the subconscious or the superconscious, you will never find the wisdom that you seek. The interviewer steps back with, "The magician said something similar about his work." And the high priestess chuckles a bit, says, "Well, even he can be right sometimes, I guess. The stuff we call magic, we were all born with it, and then we spend years sometimes learning how to access it, when all we really need is to not only learn to talk to ourselves, but to listen as well. That's the work I do every day. So many of us have turned off the switch to our meditative brain that we are completely unaware that it even has that function." And the interviewer says, "Well, do you have any parting advice for our audience?" And the high priestess explains, "My job, as it were, is merely to encourage every seeker to open up to the vast knowledge that is waiting just outside our consciousness. It really is an amazing world that you can access, full of wonder and wisdom, and it's all yours. You cannot be taught any of the wisdom that you possess. No one else can offer you answers, no matter what price you may offer. We are all so distracted by our daily routines and the next big time-wasting gadget that we just can't accept that there truly isn't an app for that. The information is free, but you will have to do the work to reach it." And the interviewer says, "Well, when can we start?" And the high priestess says, "You can start at any moment that you decide to start. But understand, this is not an outreach program. I am not here to take anyone under my wing. If you want to learn from the very best spiritual teacher there is, I will joyfully help you. But I will not cajole you into completing your homework or offer you extra credit to help make up for your lack of interest in the lesson plan. When you're ready to start, I'm always available, but don't waste my time." So that's a look at the high priestess. In segment 2 of the podcast, we look at other aspects of spiritual life and metaphysical subjects in general. And this time I'm going to talk about an article I wrote some time ago about forgiveness and a very personal story involving forgiveness. Shortly before I wrote this article, I had had a reading with a very talented and respected psychic who advised that the bright future that we both saw unfolding in the spread could all be undone by one card if I were not able to release my leftover anger and all the stuff from the past. Well, immediately I knew exactly what those things were and how I would need to clean them out of my life and release them. So in the weeks following the reading, I spent time in meditation, specifically working on the issues with my immediate family, and felt very empowered by the fact that I was finally able to look at the situation in a new way. I finally was able to see that these people had actually done their level best with the limited resources, education levels, and life skills they possessed. Simple as that. Have you ever had one of those moments when you feel that you've uncovered the long-lost answer to a life puzzle and felt that surge of energy that comes from having achieved a new level of enlightenment? Well, that surge of energy is only there because you have now reached the starting line for your spiritual task. You've only just begun, as I was learning. A few days later, my partner and I were having dinner at a local dive in another town, and someone several someones actually, from my past walked in. These are people I hadn't seen, spoken with, or even thought much about for about 20 years now. Some of these people represented serious anger issues that I hadn't even considered in my initial work. They were out of sight, out of mind. And then it hit me that this assignment includes these people too. After discussing it with my partner at length, I did go over, greet them, and though I was unsure what to expect of the encounter, I still went over there bravely. And I walked away unscathed and noticed that once again I had that surge of energy that comes from having achieved a new level of enlightenment. Yes, I still did not realize that I was still just beginning. Just beginning. The very next day, I received word from out of state that my 90-some-year-old step-grandmother was not doing well. As I texted with my aunt about the situation, I became aware of more unfinished anger issues with other members of the extended family. Then I started to see all the interconnected pieces of this little anger web that I had built and then more or less abandoned without resolving. So if you can put it behind you, that was always apparently my thought, if you can put it behind you, then you don't have to worry about it anymore. Oh no, that's not true. These people had through the years become irrelevant. They no longer possessed any power in my life, and their impact had been mostly forgotten until this new situation was bringing them right up to the surface and right to the forefront. My partner and I proceeded to do a couple of readings on the subject of all these revelations, which seemed to be popping up and needed to be counted. I saw my role clearly and very quickly as the one who must forgive and begin the healing process by realizing first that I cannot change the past, I can only change my perspective. Then I experienced something new. It wasn't so much a surge of energy, but a deep sense of knowing. And with a huge sigh, I said, I finally get it. It isn't enough to forgive them. And boy, this is a tough one, folks. I have to embrace them with gratitude for the lessons they taught me and the examples they set. Now is where we are, with all that experience and knowledge of our lifetime up to this moment. With gratitude, we respect all those who taught us the meaning of self-reliance, who served as terrible examples in love and compassion, and shaped us in whatever way, for it has made us the enlightened being that we can be today. In the third segment of our podcast, we take a question from the audience, someone who needs advice from the cards. And today is Claire, who is writing in, and she says, I am growing frustrated, waiting for the right person to come into my life. Even more discouraging is that all the advice that I get from friends or even psychics is confusing and ambiguous. Can you help? So, the following is my response. Dear Claire, I thank you for your question and expressing your frustration. Defining the real question at hand can make all the difference in the answers we receive. I also firmly believe that refining and defining our question can be far more valuable than an answer. And as I shuffled the cards, one of them jumped out, so we'll take a look at the devil later in this reading. The three cards that I pulled are the Hanged Man, the Seven of Wands, and the Ace of Coins. Well, as some of you may already know, the Hanged Man is my favorite card in the deck. And he says to me that no matter what the situation, no matter what challenge is before me, there's a new perspective which will change everything. Sometimes we just have to shake up our world and ask questions, some really hard questions sometimes, to see things from a different angle. The Seven of Wands is about creative visualization. In the case of the wands, this has to do with getting better acquainted with yourself, your true passions, your motivations. This card says to me that part of your frustration stems from not really knowing yourself intimately. How well do you know yourself? And what will ultimately bring you true happiness? This card is telling me that you need to be careful not to compromise yourself to gain the approval of others. And the third card I drew is the Ace of Coins. This card is all about the physical side of life, our money, our home, health issues. The aces are exciting cards to see in a reading since they denote a brand new start. When we're at this stage on any level, we have not yet encountered any obstacles or challenges, so it's extremely optimistic. In this case, I am getting a strong feeling that a move is coming up for you, and it will be a chance to make new social contacts and acquaintances. Now, remember that card that jumped out of the deck when we were shuffling? The Devil card. The Devil is sometimes called the addiction card. I don't see him as representing physical addiction so much as mental addiction, and let's face it, that's where all addictions start. He is speaking to us about those times when we become so attached to a belief that we become stuck in our ways. It gives the feeling that past hurts and disappointments have made you more guarded when meeting new people, both socially and in business. And this defensive thinking shuts out many who seek to get to know you. So in summary, get ready for some exciting changes in your life as you look forward to a move which will be as transformative as you will allow. It's all up to you. This opportunity allows you to get to know yourself on a new level and define yourself more fully, removed from the shadow of your past. Can you let go of old patterns and without compromising your integrity be more open to those around you? Think about that for a bit. Will you put everything on the table and virtually turn your world upside down to gain a new perspective? If you can do this, the results can be astounding. Thank you for your question, Claire. Thank you for joining us for episode 4 of the Oracle Scroll. And once again, if you have questions, comments, or if you'd like to send in a question for the readers to work through, then please address them to theoraclescroll@gmail.com. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Oracle Scroll. Find us on Facebook at the Oracle Scroll. If you wish to send comments, suggestions, or requests, please address them to theoraclescroll@gmail.com.